Let's take a closer look at the science of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. My name is Brandon, and I'm a mechanical engineer with more than a decade of experience in the manufacturing and space industries. I've also dabbled as a pundit in the online film space, and when it comes to movies and TV, they don't always get the physics right. So join me as we have a little fun with physics and take a deep dive into the wonderful world of Willy Wonka. So the idea here is that the gas from these carbonated beverages caused Charlie and Grandpa Joe to float in the air. The only problem with that is that carbon dioxide is heavier than air, so it can't float on air. If you want to float, you'd have to ingest a gas much lighter than air. The best example we have is helium. But exactly how much helium would you need to consume to float? Knowing the density of air, the density of helium, and assuming the mass of Grandpa Joe to be about 80 kilograms, we can determine the volume of helium needed to generate a buoyant force to be about 75 meters cubed, or 5,000 party balloons.
It's the most amazing, fabulous, sensational gum in the whole world.
What's so fab about it?
So how long does Violet have until she bursts? Engineering is all about problem solving, and there's a lot of information that we simply don't know. In this fictional world, we have to accept that Violet could blow up like a balloon from an excess consumption of juice. But there's no way of predicting when she might burst. However, we are a clever bunch, and we don't necessarily need to know that information to know that Violet doesn't have long. Examining the footage, we can see that her stomach volume appears to be expanding at an exponential rate. If we mark this moment as our frame of reference, we can visually see that at 5 seconds, Violet's stomach volume increases to a ratio of 3 to 2. Then at 25 seconds, her stomach volume increases to a ratio of 12 to 2, or 6 to 1. Finally, at 40 seconds, we can see her stomach rose to an alarming volume 26 times its normal size. We can quickly see that the increase in her stomach is exponential, and those Oompa Loompas more than likely have mere seconds to start squeezing that juice from Violet Beauregard before her situation becomes dire.
It happens every time. They all become blueberries.
You've really done it this time, haven't you, Wonka?
Augustus, please, don't do that. My chocolate must never be touched by human hands. Please.
So the thing I've always wondered about this scene is how much pressure is building up under Augustus Gloop when he's stuck in the pipe.
Oh, the pressure will get him out. Terrific pressure is building up behind the blockage.
Let's assume the pump sits below a water-based chocolate reservoir. This may not be the case in the film, but it will keep things simple and help us reduce the risk of a phenomenon known as cavitation. If placed above the surface, the pump would need to decrease pressure to draw the fluid vertically through the piping, and this can cause the fluid to vaporize. Heated liquids are even more susceptible to this phenomenon. It may not seem like much, but those tiny little air pockets can wreak havoc on your pump. Let's assume the density of chocolate to be the following, and let's ignore any losses due to friction. Taking a closer look at the footage, we can approximate the height of the pipe to be at least 8 meters. Now there's no way of knowing the deadhead pressure of the pump or the maximum pressure in what you would call a no-flow condition. However, we can assume it to be greater than the static pressure required to pump the chocolate to a height of 8 meters. So what does this mean? If you point the pump straight up, the deadhead pressure is the amount of pressure in the pump when the fluid stops flowing. Using Bernoulli's equation, we can approximate the deadhead pressure in the pump to be greater than 104 kilopascals or 15 psi. When Augustus gets stuck in the pipe, the blockage appears to be about 2 meters above the surface of the reservoir. Using Bernoulli's equation once again, we can determine the pressure under Augustus to be no less than 78 kilopascals or 11.25 psi, which would generate 3,400 pounds of force. Now, the true pressure at which Augustus gets dislodged is impossible to know, and I'd bet it happens at a magnitude much lower than what we see here, but this gets us in the ballpark.
These are the geese that lay the golden eggs. As you can see, they're larger than ordinary geese. As a matter of fact.
Here we see Wonka using a device called an educated egg-dicator.
It's a lot of nonsense.
To determine which golden eggs are good and which ones are bad. To me, it looks like a simple measuring device. There's most likely a known weight or mass for what Wonka considers to be a good egg versus a bad egg. Here's what we know. The eggs are made out of solid chocolate and are 8 times the size of regular goose eggs. If we scale up the volume of a typical goose egg by a factor of 8 and multiply that value by the density of chocolate, then the golden eggs at Wonka's chocolate factory have an estimated mass of 1.7 kilograms or 3.75 pounds. Now, it stands to reason that any item placed on the educated egg-dicator that varies from that mass would be determined to be a bad egg. But I don't know, this is a tough one. Comment down below and let me know your thoughts on how the educated egg-dicator works.
She was a bad egg.
Wonkavision, my very latest and greatest invention.
Okay, so there's a lot going on in this scene, but the most obvious to me is what I'm gonna call the Ant-Man effect. Mike TV goes from a size of a regular child to only a few inches tall, while supposedly retaining all of his body mass, meaning he should still have the weight of a 9-year-old boy. So would Mrs. TV be able to just put Mike into her purse? I don't think so. Even if he could shrink down to the size of an action figure, odds are his organs wouldn't be able to function properly because human beings have evolved to be the size that we are. Any large deviation from this scale in our bodies just don't work. That's why King Kong could never exist. But that's a problem for another day.
Great. He's completely unharmed.
So that's the physics of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Now it's time to let me know your thoughts. Tell me what I got right, tell me what I got wrong. What other films do you want to see me react to? Let me know in the comment section down below, and as always, thank you for taking time out of your day for this moment of science.
Stop, don't come back.
Science exists everywhere, even in the areas you'd least expect. Here's the science of Mean Girls you may have missed.
Take that fake apology and shove it right up your hairy...
Have you ever wondered how hard Regina George was hit by that bus? If we play back the video at 60 frames per second, we can see the bus travels approximately 2.5 meters over the course of 180 milliseconds, hitting Regina with a velocity of 14 meters per second or 30 miles per hour. And let's assume her mass to be 50 kilograms. Let's say the mass of the average school bus is 5,000 kilograms. Traveling at this velocity, a school bus carries with it 4,600 joules of kinetic energy, which is the equivalent of about 40 Major League fastballs. If we research data from known car crashes, we can assume the impact occurs over a duration of 5 milliseconds, making the force of impact on Regina 137,000 newtons or 31,000 pounds. To provide a frame of reference, the human femur can break from a force of only 4,000 newtons or 900 pounds. In fact, studies have shown that this type of impact has a 1 in 5 chance of death. Only this film could make sharing your feelings a contact sport.
Oh my god. Okay.
Have you ever wondered how hard Gretchen hit Karen and how bad it would have been if she had hit the floor instead? Examining the footage, we can approximate the height of Gretchen's fall to be 1.5 meters, and let's assume her mass to be 50 kilograms. If we play back the video at 60 frames per second, we can see that Gretchen's fall lasts roughly 30 frames, giving her an average velocity of 3 meters per second or 7 miles per hour. An impact force can be determined in one of two ways. It's either the change in momentum over a certain period of time, or the amount of kinetic energy dispersed over a certain distance. In other words, how much an object, or in this case a person, deflects from the force of impact. For this problem, we're going to approximate the total deflection of Gretchen and Karen's bodies to be 250 millimeters over a duration of 80 milliseconds. This gives us an impact force of 900 newtons, or 200 pounds. If we remove Karen from the equation entirely, the deflection in this instance can be assumed to be 125 millimeters over a duration of 40 milliseconds, or half of what it was before. If we do this, Gretchen hits the floor with an impact of 1,800 newtons, or 400 pounds. Now, in most cases, this wouldn't be enough to break a bone or cause a concussion unless she landed on her head. Then maybe. So she actually would be able to just walk it off. The human body is capable of so much more than you think. However, that doesn't mean I recommend trying this at home.
Okay, walk it off.
Last but not least, let's examine when Jason gets hit in the face with that boombox during the Plastic's iconic performance of Jingle Bell Rock. It's the only impact in the film we get to see in its entirety, so we don't have to guess or approximate the amount of time the boombox is in direct contact with Jason's face. Examining the footage at 60 frames per second, we can see the boombox travels for 10 frames over an estimated distance of 300 millimeters, giving us an average velocity of 2 meters per second or 4 miles per hour. Researching a boombox of comparable size, we can say with some certainty that it carries a mass of roughly 4 pounds. We can visually see that the impact lasts for 80 milliseconds, giving us an impact force of 50 newtons or 11 pounds, which is nearly triple the static weight of the boombox. Now, it's not quite enough to give you a concussion, off by a factor of 100 in fact, but it is enough to make you weary of sitting in the front row. As you can see, kinetic energy can vastly change the impact an object has. From a school bus to a trust fall and even a boombox, no object is safe from its destructive power. Now it's your turn. Do you think Regina should have survived that school bus? Who would you do a trust fall with? And do you think you could walk off a boombox directly to the face? Comment down below and let me know. Until next time, thank you for taking time out of your day for this moment of science, and you can always sit with us.
I did not leave the South Side for this.
Did you know the engineering of the Titanic accelerated its demise? And it's time to settle that infamous door debate once and for all. Let's talk about the physics behind Titanic.
I wasn't setting the Wayback Machine for 20 years ago on Titanic.
James Cameron has an impeccable attention to detail when it comes to his films. And maybe if he were around for the design of the Titanic, things might have gone differently. According to the builders of the Titanic, the ship was designed to survive the worst possible accident at sea for 2 or 3 days before sinking. Well, we all know that's not what happened. The unsinkable ship sank in less than 3 hours upon impact with that iceberg. So what went wrong? There are multiple contributing factors, from the brittleness of the steel hull and poor shear strength of the rivets. However, I won't hold this against them because the use of these materials was common practice at the time. The most egregious engineering flub of the Titanic has to do with the design of the transverse bulkheads of the watertight compartments. Allow me to explain. Transverse bulkheads divide the vessel from side to side and are used to create watertight compartments on a ship. The lower section of the Titanic was divided into 16 compartments that could easily be sealed off in the event the hull was punctured and leaking water, and that's exactly what they did. They worked as designed. The problem is the compartments were only watertight horizontally. When the damaged compartments began to flood, the ship pitched forward, allowing water to spill over into the adjacent undamaged compartments, and those watertight seals quickly became a problem. This caused the ship to continue pitching forward, causing the vessel to snap in two from the bending stress, as we see portrayed accurately in the film. After the events of the Titanic, engineers quickly learned their lesson. Double-sided holes were added to prevent hull punctures from flooding the entire ship, and the transverse bulkheads of watertight compartments were raised to a level that would prevent water from spilling over into the entire ship if pitched at a slight angle. If any of these fixes were implemented on the Titanic, it would have been enough to keep the ship afloat long enough for rescue to arrive, saving the lives of close to 1,500 people on board, including, in this film's case, the fictional Jack Dawson.
It doesn't look like it's a roaring success.
Yes, it's true. Although Jack and Rose could have both physically fit on that board, which was not a door by the way, it was wood paneling from above a door. The truth is, they collectively weighed too much and the board would have sank. This has been proven empirically by both Mythbusters and James Cameron himself, but now I'm going to show you the math as to why Jack never stood a chance. The board is roughly 1 meter by 2 meters wide and 150 millimeters thick. It's made out of white oak, which has a density of 770 kilograms per meters cubed, giving it a weight of 2,264 newtons, or 509 pounds. We're going to assume Jack weighs 715 newtons, and Rose weighs 550 newtons, average weights for their given height. When combined, Jack, Rose, and the board create a weight of 3,500 newtons, or 787 pounds. Assuming they displace a volume of water equal to the volume of the board, then the buoyant force acting on them would be 2,940 newtons, or 661 pounds, not nearly enough to keep them afloat. However, if you remove Jack from the equation, the combined weight of Rose and the board is 2,785 newtons, or 626 pounds, which is, you guessed it, less than the buoyant force. In this case, Rose floats. And there you have it. This tragedy has a lot to teach us about science and engineering design. On the surface, things aren't always as they seem. So remember to keep an open mind, trust the math, and prepare for anything. And as always, thank you for taking time out of your day for this moment of science.
I'm the king of the world!
For over 90 years since King Kong changed the way we see movies, Godzilla and Kong have always been larger than life on the silver screen. But did these creatures ever survive in the real world? Let's find out. According to Monarch case files, Godzilla stands at 120 meters tall and weighs a whopping 99,000 tons or 198 million pounds. while Kong towers just shy of that at 103 meters with an estimated weight of roughly 158,000 tons or 316 million pounds. But I have a hard time believing that a 100-meter ape would weigh so much more than Godzilla. Since Kong is essentially a giant gorilla, let's scale up a gorilla to Kong's height and see what we get. The average adult gorilla can weigh around 181 kilograms and stand at 1.6 meters tall. When scaled up to the size of Kong, this gives us a mass of 48 million kilograms. This is only about a third of the mass documented by Monarch, but Kong isn't a typical gorilla either. His body structure and posture is more human-like than versions prior, and since our approximation was in the same order of magnitude as the film, I'm willing to let this discrepancy slide. But let's not shy away from the point. All you need to know is that these monsters are massive. To put Godzilla's size into perspective, the largest dinosaur to ever roam the Earth measured close to 100 feet tall and weighed nearly 100 tons. That's 0.1% of Godzilla's weight.
Let them fight.
Mass isn't the only problem with Godzilla and Kong. There's an evolutionary reason why we don't have 400-foot gorillas and fire-breathing dragons walking around. The anatomy just doesn't work. When you scale up an object by a factor of X, the surface area of that object increases by a factor of X squared, while the volume of the object increases by a factor of X cubed. For example, if an object doubles in size, its surface area increases by a factor of 4, while its volume increases by a factor of 8. In other words, a gorilla doubled in size has 8 times the mass of a normal gorilla, and that's only where the problems start. When an animal is scaled up to the size of their legendary counterparts, organs become too big to function, and the heart is no longer strong enough to pump blood throughout the body. And because the mass that's being supported increases at a faster rate than the cross-sectional area, bones are no longer strong enough to support the weight and movement of these animals. They would simply shatter. To support the size of these creatures, their bones would have to be stronger than titanium alloy, making them arguably some of the most valuable materials on the planet. The true scale of these monsters is massive. In Godzilla vs. Kong, Adam Wingard did a great job blending the slow movement of 2014's Godzilla with the dynamic action of 2019's King of the Monsters. But just how fast are Godzilla and Kong in the Monsterverse? And could they break the speed of sound with the wave of a hand? Analyzing the footage of Godzilla vs. Kong at 24 frames per second, I examined the movement of these two titans to estimate their velocities from 4 unique sequences in the film, and here's what I found. In this scene, Godzilla's claw travels approximately 60 meters over the course of 6 frames of footage, giving his swat at Kong a velocity of 240 meters per second or 537 miles per hour, which is about the same velocity as a commercial airplane. In this shot, Kong's fist travels approximately 100 meters over the course of 14 frames of footage, giving his punch a velocity of 172 meters per second or 385 miles per hour. That's impressive, but we can do better. Because when Kong uses his fist as a hammer, it travels approximately 50 meters over the course of 5 frames, giving his attack a velocity of 240 meters per second or 537 miles per hour, matching the speed of Godzilla. But when Kong uses his axe to deliver a fatal blow to Mechagodzilla, the tip of his weapon travels approximately 100 meters over the course of 5 frames, giving his swing a velocity of 599 meters per second or 1,340 miles per hour, well surpassing the speed of sound. Meaning the tip of Kong's axe has a potential to create a sonic boom every time he swings it. Godzilla and Kong may look like they're moving in slow motion, but in reality, these monsters are as fast as a fighter jet. And that's the true scale of Godzilla and Kong. They could never exist in our world. But that's probably for the best. Are you disappointed by this news? Is there still hope for the existence of a Mechagodzilla? Comment down below and let me know. And as always, thank you for taking time out of your day for this moment of science. Is a dog actually capable of supporting the weight of a station wagon? Here's why Tim Burton might know a bit more about physics than you think. Beetlejuice is a fantastical film full of Tim Burton's wildest ideas. It's known for its unique take on the supernatural and the journey of life after death. But did its director actually do his research? Let me set the scene. The car used in the film was a 1977 Volvo 245. After a little bit of research, I was able to find the permissible weights allowed on each axle to be about 1,800 and 2,600 pounds respectively, and the maximum capacity of the car sits at about 1,100 pounds. For the sake of ease, let's state some assumptions. Let's assume the car is pivoting on the edge of the bridge exactly halfway between its front and rear axles. Let's also assume the weight of the passengers and cargo in a full capacity Volvo 245 to be centered directly above the rear axle. Finally, let's assume the permissible axle weights to be the loads on each axle when the car is at full capacity. With these assumptions in mind, I took the listed capacity weight and subtracted it from the permissible weight given for the rear axle, which comes out to be about 1,400 pounds. From here, I added the weight of 2 adult passengers above the front seat of the car and interpolated these values to solve for the center of gravity, which in this instance hangs half a foot over the edge of the bridge. Now let's assume the length of a wooden beam is about 8.5 feet, with one end sitting directly below the car's center of gravity, and the other end carries the weight of the dog. The dog in the film is a Billy breed, which could weigh as much as 70 pounds. Well, working out the math, in order to support the weight of the station wagon, the dog would need to weigh about 236 pounds. Which is not that far off. I mean, we're working with theoretical numbers here, but if this were an episode of Mythbusters, I'd be inclined to call this one plausible. And I know this is an extreme set of circumstances, but it's just too close to ignore. The type of car, the placement of the crash, the length of the beam, whoever staged this scene had to know exactly what they were doing. But there is one problem. The tensile stress on the beam is upwards of 21,000 psi. Now the wood on the bridge is most likely some type of pine, which only carries a tensile strength with it of about 300 psi. The beam would snap like a twig. But that's not even the craziest part. Let's rewind back a bit. We can use the same interpolation method from before to find the center of gravity of the car at full capacity. And in this case, a fully loaded station wagon full of something like moving boxes would have a center of gravity much closer to the rear axle, which in this scene is right above the bridge. This shift in location would prevent the car from flipping over the edge, which means Jane Butterfield, the overbearing realtor who begged the Maitlands to sell their home, is actually the unsung hero of the story. If they had only listened to her, they may just be alive today. And there you have it. This sequence is not that far-fetched. But what do you think? Am I way off base here, or does Tim Burton have a fallback career in the world of physics? Comment down below and let me know. And as always, thank you for taking time out of your day for this moment of science.
It's showtime.